So before I start this video, I'm going to put it out that because Facebook made the ever so wonderful decision to get rid of the ability to create and edit notes, which is right up there in dumbness with when YouTube got rid of the ability to post videos as responses, thanks Reply Girls, I moved my list of concerts I've been to that I used to have as a note on my fan page over to a Google Doc that's viewable to the public. It makes note of the headlining act, date, venue, opening bands, and more. I edit this list every time I purchase a ticket to a concert, as well as after I go to that concert. If you want to check it out, the link's in the description. Roll the intro. Hey guys, RanterInShades here, exercising my first to memorize vlog style. If there's anything about 2020 we can all agree on, it's that I fucking miss concerts. They've been my favorite pastime ever since I started going to concerts in 2008, not just because I get to see a live performance from a band I care about, nor is it even just because I get a shirt to add to my ever-growing band shirt collection, but because I get to potentially find a new band to start following that's opening for the headlining act. And that's what this countdown is going to be about. The bands that made a great first impression on me upon catching their set at the concert in question. These are bands I had never heard of prior to the show that really won me over with their set. The two of you that follow my probably now defunct shirt collection series will probably have an idea of some of the bands I'm going to be including on this list. Some of these names will surprise you that I wasn't yet a fan of given how well known and respected they are, but hey, I'm a fan now. And the ordering here is based not so much on the quality of their music as it is on how enthused I was by their performance. There's hardly a feeling like seeing a band play for the first time and saying to yourself, okay, I need to look into this band when I get home. I should also note that I'm not going to be including any local bands on the main list. I am, however, going to mention the few that got me really excited at the time and honorable mentions. So allow me to feel nostalgic about some great concert memories, and let's begin. Number 10. I first heard of the Californian traditional metal band Holy Grail when they were the first band to take the stage on the Metal Alliance tour in 2013. I was mainly going to the show to see Anthrax since I had already seen Slayer and Megadeth before, and Anthrax was bound to be my best bet for who in the big four of thrash metal I would be able to see next. Also on this tour were Exodus, Municipal Waste, Shadows Fall, who were actually filling in for High on Fire at some select dates, and the one band on this bill I had not heard of, Holy Grail. They walked on stage to this rap beat that went something like, Holy Grail, Holy Grail. Something, Holy Grail. And next thing I knew, they started hitting hard. I was particularly impressed by their vocalist, James Paul Luna, who has a pretty fantastic shriek. I was expecting the music to sound a lot thrashier than it did since this was a predominantly thrash metal lineup, but I was pretty pleased with what I heard from this band. Holy Grail is a band that comes readily to mind when I think of newer traditional metal bands from the past decade. They had 2 albums out at the time of the show I went to, my favorite being their 2010 debut, Crisis in Utopia. They're a solid band, and definitely worth checking out. Number 9. Anvil is definitely a classic name if you're a fan of 80s metal, but I'd never heard of them by the time I saw them open for AC/DC in 2009 at the concert I mentioned in the What's Wrong With I did on them. And given how this was around the time I really started taking a deep dive into 80s metal, and I don't mean just with glam, I was very much won over by this Canadian band's performance. Anvil were still riding the wave of success from the documentary Anvil, The Story of Anvil, at the time, and this was apparently their first time coming to the States. And given how they have a song on their 1981 debut, Hard and Heavy, literally called AC/DC, I'm sure being on this tour was a career highlight for them. I was impressed with the riffing and soloing from vocalist/guitarist Steve Lips Kudlow with that big-ass fucking smile, as well as his chemistry with drummer Rob Reiner, not to be confused with the sweaty, burger-loving, anti-smoking activist director. I almost felt bad enjoying Anvil's set as much as I did, given that they were opening for AC/DC of all bands. AC/DC's set was fun, but I was definitely excited to look into Anvil when I got home. The song and album I was impressed the most with was 1982's Metal on Metal. If you're a classic metal fan and you haven't heard of Anvil, check them out. They're not exactly a band I'd put on the level of a band like Judas Priest or Accept, but they have a pretty Saxon-like sound and some nice personality. Number 8. Joe Satriani is an artist I always have to see whenever he's on tour, being that he's my favorite musician and biggest musical influence. He had just put out Black Swans and Wormhole Wizards in 2010, and opening for him on this tour was a gentleman named Ned Ebbett. Musically, I found his stuff to be kind of by-the-numbers hard rock, except for one thing. He plays a fretless guitar. That fact immediately pushed him from a kind of typical sounding hard rock act to a rare gem. There aren't a whole lot of fretless players I can think of other than Ned. I was really taken in by the sound of his fingers sliding up and down the glass neck at such ease. It sounded better than any slide playing I'd ever heard, and I knew this was a guy I would need to look into. Also, since I have a feeling someone will mention him in the comments, this was before I heard of Bumblefoot. I still wouldn't exactly say his music is super unique, but Ned himself is interesting enough as a musician that I can overlook that, and I'd recommend seeing what he's all about. If I had to recommend an album, I'd go with the album he had put out at the time, Afraid for You, yes, that's how it's spelled, and checking out songs like the title track and Wrong Thing. One of these days I need to play a fretless guitar. The closest I've played is this fretless bass with nylon strings when I was in high school. Number 7. The first time I heard of the prog rock band Little Tybee was in one of Official GATG's videos, I cannot remember which one, and I didn't think much of it. But then I found out they were going to be opening on Sean's Homie tour, and my expectations were set pretty high. Also on this tour was Covet, who I had seen earlier in 2017 opening for Polyphia, and an experimental math rock band Terra Melos, who I was not particularly impressed by. This band, however, did catch my attention. Little Tybee are very unconventional looking at first glance. They have a violin player, an acoustic guitar player, and the guy that really made me interested in looking into this band, Josh Martin, who is basically an older, balder version of Rob Scallon. It was so weird seeing him capo the top 6 strings on his 8-string guitar, along with playing it like a Chapman stick. He alone sold me on this band, and I was damn excited. Little Tybee are definitely a weird band, but not weird in a sense that it's off-putting. They have a sound that's really indie-folky sounding, but I find it to be a lot more exciting than I tend to feel about a lot of indie folk bands. Check them out. They have 4 albums out, my favorite being their 2011 album, Humorous Too. Number 6. The Early November is a really respected name in emo, and I remember after seeing them open for my second favorite band, Bayside, my second time seeing them in 2015 when I made a trip out to New Haven, I got some surprised looks from some friends of mine at college that I hadn't heard of them. I wasn't all that intrigued by the first opener at this show, Better Off, but the Early November really wowed me. Arthur Ace Enders is a great vocalist and songwriter, and his band has some very dynamic and versatile material, which you'll definitely find on their magnum opus triple album, The Mother, the Mechanic, and the Path. They have punky songs, folky songs, ballads, and more, and this earned them a view from me as being one of the most interesting bands I've come across. So it was pretty fitting that they were on this tour with Bayside, a band that has a similar sense of versatility in their discography and some similar lyrics as well. I'm really happy I'm into this band. They have a great discography that should appeal to alternative rock fans of all kinds. That triple album is indeed my favorite in their discography, but songs like Tell Me Why and Better This Way are my picks for my favorite songs of theirs. Number 5. You're probably wondering why I'm putting a tie here. That would be because my exposure to both Major League and Hands Like Houses was at the same show. I was seeing Silverstein, another one of my favorite bands of all time, touring for the 10-year anniversary of one of my favorite albums of all time, 2005's Discovering the Waterfront, and they had 3 opening acts at this show. The first being a pretty typical sounding post-hardcore band called My Iron Lung, and then came these 2 bands in question. Major League was a major step up from the first band. Their stuff was catchy and well written, and I knew they would be a band I would need to look into later. I wouldn't say they popped as hard as other pop-punk bands, but the writing is interesting enough that I see them as standout. They had kind of an Academy Is, Starting Line, Motion City soundtrack type sound. Unfortunately, they've since broken up in 2016, but they left behind 2 EPs and 2 solid albums, my favorite being 2012's Hard Feelings, which I find to be the heavier of the 2. Then the Aussies and Hands Like Houses took the stage, and the show really started amping up. Their set was wicked fun, especially when they got to playing their cover of Torn by Edna Swap. They're a band that sound heavy and experimental without sounding too metalcore, and that's always been my favorite type of post-hardcore. But at the same time, they sound accessible enough that there's plenty to attract you to the music, just directly smack in the middle between pop-punk and metalcore. My favorite album from them would be their 2013 album Unimagined, with my favorite song being The House You Built. I definitely look back on this concert as one of the best ones I've been to, not just because of Silverstein playing their best album from front to back, but also because of these 2 bands' sets doing a great job winning me over. I've since become quite excited whenever I go to punk shows because of this level of a great first impression made twice in the same night. Number 4. Oh my god, I just realized this band is at number 4. This one I know for sure is raising a ton of eyebrows. You're not crazy. 2014 Shades was for not knowing 4 Years Strong prior to my seeing them on tour with Bayside, my first time seeing them, especially since they're from my fucking state. I don't really remember much about the first 2 openers at this show, but 4 Years Strong's performance will stand out in my mind forever. Why? because it was during their set that I participated, not exactly voluntarily, in my first and only mosh pit. They are quite a band to mosh to say the least. Next to A Day to Remember, 4 Year Strong are seen as being the kings of easycore. Heavy chugging, catchy hooks, a rowdy attitude, they're one of the heaviest bands you'll hear in pop punk, to the point where I almost want to refer to them as a hardcore band. The whole floor was basically one giant pit, and that venue in New York was absolutely torn apart by 4 Year Strong's performance. By the time they finished, I had already felt really worn out before Bayside even took the stage. This is definitely an unpopular opinion of mine that I know is going to get the metal elitists riled up, but I don't like moshing. I just don't like being pushed and shoved into people when I'm simply trying to enjoy live music. And given how bonkers of a band 4 Year Strong is, I can't say I can think of a better band to make me say, never again. But that frustration I felt at all the shoving was definitely enough to tell me that this is a band I should really be into, especially with an album like Enemy of the World and songs like It Must Really Suck to Be 4 Year Strong right now. I disagree! Paul Revere's Midnight Ride and Flannel is the color of my energy. Number 3. Similar to how the alternative metal band The Raven Age features the son of a member of Iron Maiden, in their case Steve Harris's son George, on guitar, As Lions is an alternative metal band fronted by Bruce Dickinson's son Austin. I find both bands to be fantastic and have the potential to be frontrunners in the current generation of metal. I don't know about you, but in my opinion, they live up to the expectations set of them following in the footsteps of their fathers, and my exposure to the latter was when they were one of the opening bands on Nothing More's 2017 tour before they released The Stories We Tell Ourselves. Of the 3 openers at the show, As Lions was by far the best. They have a great modern metal sound that I find to be accessible yet not too typical for the genre. Their set was so great that I was pissed they were only the second band on. The first band, Hell or High Water, was a pretty by-the-numbers hard rock band, but the band that came on after As Lions, Black Map, was fucking horrendous. As Lions easily blew both of these bands out the water, and I see them as a much more worthy band to be opening for a band as fantastic as Nothing More than those other 2 bands could even dream of. As of this video's release, they only have one album under their belt, Selfish Age, which came out in 2017. It was one of my favorite albums of that year, and it gave me high hopes for the band's future. Not even saying that just because of the tie to Iron Maiden. I genuinely believe in As Lions, largely because of how wowed I was by their set at that Nothing More show. Hopefully a sophomore album is in the works, because I'd be damn excited. Number 2. In 2015, the punk label Fat Wreck Chords turned 25 years old, and to celebrate, the Fat Wreck for 25 Years tour was organized. NoFX was headlining since the label was founded by Fat Mike, but I was mainly going to the show for Strung Out. I was already into Lagwagon, and the bands Swingin' Utters and the Flatliners made a pretty decent impression on me, but it was nothing like that of Masked Intruder. So let me set the stage. There's these 4 guys wearing different colored ski masks and are referred to as just yellow, green, red, and the Frosted View, I mean blue. And as they're playing their happy-go-lucky pop-punk goodness, they have a cop on stage with them looking really cross. The blue guy then says after the first couple songs that he went to jail, and I guess he was on probation to do this tour, so the cop is following him and his band so that he doesn't get into any trouble, though he loves to party. Turns out that cop is their hype man, because he immediately started dancing and jumping around on stage and in the crowd, and I just lost it. Masked Intruder have perhaps the best live gimmick ever. The music is cool, but their stage presence is amazing. I'm not normally this intrigued by gimmicky bands, but this is one of the most fun bands I've ever encountered. They've got some good material, with my favorite album being their self-titled from 2012, but this is a band that absolutely must be seen live. I feel bad for blowing the Cop Dude's cover. I'm sorry, please don't arrest me. But it's really necessary to convey just how great of an impression Masked Intruder made on me at this show. Before I get to my number 1, here's those honorable mentioned local bands you are highly encouraged to check out if you're unfamiliar with them. The first is Bad Case of Big Mouth, a band you should be familiar with if you're an older viewer of this channel. The 2 shows I played at with them were some of the most fun experiences of my life, especially when it came to observing the chemistry between their 2 vocalists, Tyler Drama Spygland having the super catchy cleans, and John Price having a very deathcore-like scream. They're the ultimate amalgamation of 4 Years Strong and A Day to Remember. They unfortunately aren't together anymore. I won't explain why since it's really sad, but I'm really proud of the material they put out. Same with the next one, Sick Veta, another band that was the subject of a video I made. I caught them opening for I the Mighty in 2016, and they made the best impression out of the 4 opening bands, who themselves made pretty good impressions. Really awesome and dynamic pop punk that reminds me a lot of Anne Berlin, and I'm bummed they've broken up too. Same with the next band, Sawmill. I encountered them at my college's local music festival in 2014, and they made the best first impression on me out of all the bands I got into through that occasion. I was buddies with the singer Nick Rigas, also known as the animator Rigmarole here on YouTube, and I had absolutely no idea he sang in a hardcore band. Needless to say, I was floored at how banging their set was. Their song Rome is one of my favorite songs about depression. And everybody says, slow down, catch your breath, wow, find another way. And everybody says, hold on, get a grip, now, slip away. Next is the Astral Cadence. I saw this band when I made my trip to New York 2 years ago to see Jared Dines and the band formerly known as Rest Repose. My boys in Valence were also playing at this show. They're not on this list because their first impression didn't take place at a show, and of the other bands opening, this instrumental prog metal band made the best impression on me, especially with the slickness of their guitarist Sean Washington, who's basically a mini Tosin Abasi, and I'm not just saying that because he's black. Next is George Orwell the Musical. Dumb name, yes, but solid progressive metalcore. They were one of the openers at the Angel Vivaldi Gus G co-headline tour I saw in 2016, along with my final honorable mention from this same show, Without Warning. They're a traditional heavy metal band with some epic Bruce Dickinson sounding vocals from Ian Raposa, and great guitar harmonies from Keith Conway and Daryl Santana. If you're into any of these styles, or if anything I said about these bands interests you, do scope them out. I'll be sure to have some links in the description. Now let's get to my number 1. In the fall of 2014, I made a trip from my college's campus out into Brooklyn to see Judas Priest on the Redeemer of Souls tour. They had Steel Panther opening, which really excited me. Unfortunately, due to shit traffic, along with me being terrible at planning the timing of when I left, got to the city, and cabbed over to the Barclays Center, and this was before I started using Uber, I barely caught the end of Steel Panther's set. So when they announced their next tour in the spring of 2015, I decided at the last minute to grab a ticket so I could make up for missing their set on the Judas Priest tour. And it was there that I saw the opening band that made the best first impression on me to date, New Zealand's own Like a Storm. I was not expecting to be as blown away as I was by this band featuring 3 brothers. They had a catchiness to their alt-metal sound, they had an edge to it as well, but the most unusual thing about this band was their incorporation of didgeridoo. If there's anything that's objectively amazing about metal, it's that much like how Ratatouille has a message of anyone being able to cook, any instrument can be metal if utilized properly. Usually folk metal is the one subgenre to utilize a lot of the stranger instruments out there, and didgeridoo is a pretty strange instrument, but Like a Storm's usage is not only tasteful, but it isn't overbearing. I was so excited to be having as much fun as I was during their set, and since I already had a Steel Panther shirt and didn't see much of a need to get another one, and I don't recall liking the designs they had either, I decided to put the money I had on me towards Like a Storm's 2015 album Awaken the Fire, and I not only got the CD autographed by the singer Chris Brooks, but he was also the person I took my very first concert selfie with. That is how sold I was on this band. To this day, Like a Storm represent the kind of excitement I love feeling about a band I've never heard of before. That first impression they made on me at that concert is why I like making a point to show up at the time the doors open at the venue. Well, that and me not wanting to show up too late without having at least an idea of set times. Regardless, I can't wait until concerts finally start happening again when COVID dies down. One reason being so I can potentially be as wowed by an opening band as I was by Like a Storm and the other bands on this list. So that's the end of this list. I'd love to know what kinds of bands you've seen that made a big first impression on you at a concert. Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video, take care, and have a nice day. I'm Shades, and I'll see you next time.